Sorry, we're having some technical difficulty all around here. We just went live.
Okay, great. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My clock now says it's 3:01, so I'd like to call this Special Planning and Development Committee meeting to order. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Kroll, Councillor DeAndrade, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, so our first report on the agenda this afternoon is from our planner, Kirsten Rockins, regarding the Garden Suite preliminary review. So take it away, Kirsten.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I will share my screen and we hope that the right item pops up here. Sorry, give me 1 moment. There we go. Apologies, I'm working on it.
One of those days for everyone, it seems.
Yeah, here we go. I think you got it now.
Yes.
Okay, so I am presenting the, well, this presentation is to share the staff report to initiate a review of the town's Garden Suites program, and also to seek council's direction to initiate public engagement and collect feedback on our current policy around garden suites. And in addition, I've included a short slideshow at the end to just share with you some of the garden suites that have been, well, actually all of the garden suites that have been developed under the program to date. And there we go. By way of background, the Garden Suites program was initiated in 2015, which some of you might remember, as a means of meeting a need for increased density within the low density residential areas of Gibsons. Policies to encourage development of garden suites and other infill housing were introduced to the OCP in the 2015 OCP update. And zoning regulations were developed based on a study by a planning consultant, which identified policies already in place in other communities and provided recommendations for how these might be adapted to the Gibsons context. Public feedback was received in community meetings, and this led to further adaptation of the policies and their adoption as they stand today. At the program's initiation, it was recommended that the program be monitored through its progress, and that the success of the policies be reviewed once about 10 suites have been approved. So to start, I thought I should just clarify what is a garden suite, because this is often a question that comes up with all of our recent conversation about different types of suites and accessory dwellings. And the zoning bylaw defines a garden suite as a detached dwelling unit located on the same lot as a principal building. In this diagram, there's a range of accessory dwelling types, and those within the green box are what we would define as garden suites in Gibsons. And to take this a bit further, the definition of a dwelling includes cooking facilities. And so an accessory building not containing a kitchen of some sort would not be considered a garden suite. This would be an accessory building. At the outset of the program, several benefits and positive outcomes of garden suites were recognized, including that they contribute choice in the housing market, that garden suites comprise purpose-built rental housing, that it's a form of housing that can fit within the character of existing neighborhoods, that it's a form of development that makes use of existing infrastructure, reducing costs of expansion and replacement of infrastructure. In turn, garden suites lower the greenhouse gas intensity of new building stock. And it was recognized that garden suites provide an opportunity for aging renters and homeowners to downsize and yet remain in their neighborhood and even on their own property. Garden suites can also aid in the affordability of homeownership, providing a rental income or opportunity for cost and or property sharing. They were seen to add character to the streetscape of laneways, and finally that they provide a gentle increase in density that in turn contributes to the vibrancy and walkability of neighborhoods. At the time that Gibson's garden suite policies were developed, several regulation tools were reviewed, and Gibsons took a cautious approach at the time and adopted a relatively rigorous regulation on the spectrum of regulations, including not just the zoning bylaw, but also form and character guidelines administered through a development permit. As suggested at the outset, a policy review at this time could identify opportunities to achieve the desired objectives through less costly and time-consuming means for both the applicants and the town. We're aware of a number of non-conforming suites that exist in town, it's worth mentioning, and that haven't been brought in, and it's expected that this is often on account of costs and process requirements of that permit process. And this could be addressed hopefully through consultation and the review. Garden suites were introduced to the zoning bylaw in, sorry, I've lost my spot here. Oh yes, so we've had through the duration of the program, there've been a few directions from council, specifically that staff amend the zoning bylaw to include a bonus density provision, and also that the garden suites program be reviewed to provide a report on whether the garden suites area should be expanded. We've also received over the years inquiries from individuals who would like to include their property in the garden suites areas. And so engagement on this project could gather feedback on opportunities for addressing that, as well as a range of other considerations we might want to review. The garden suite areas, as mentioned, are confined to, well, garden suite development is confined to the garden suites areas, which are shown on this map. This is a version of Schedule F in the zoning bylaw. The green areas are the garden suites areas, and this new version of the map includes the approved garden suites, those that have been issued development permits shown in yellow. So this is the first garden suite that was built. This one is on Blackberry Lane. And the owners built this garden suite and then moved into the laneway house and now rent the main house. And this property has a temporary use permit in place to keep the secondary suite in the main dwelling, in addition to the garden suite. There are, I should mention, 12 garden suites have been built to date, or sorry, have been approved to date, with 11 having been built or begun being built. This is the one that was, this was only the second application to be reviewed, and the permit was issued, but for unknown reasons, the developers didn't proceed with it, or haven't at this point, but may proceed at a later date. This one is on Gibsons Way, and this one is not on a lane, it's at the rear of a property on a steep slope, and that's why you can see it's set into the ground. Oops. This suite is on Harmony Lane behind Franklin Road. It's a small, I think it was a cob building, if I remember correctly. And this suite was built by the owners of the property along with their son, and their son moved into the unit. The property owners live elsewhere and rent the main house. This suite is above South Fletcher on Persephone Lane. And this is unique in that we've got the garage built beside the garden suite, which goes down 2 stories. And this one was built by the homeowners for a family member who needed ongoing support. And so she lives in the garden suite close to her parents. This suite was built along on Blackberry Lane, across from the first suite actually, was built along with the main house at the same time. And a variance was issued to reduce the front lot line setback, essentially to allow the garden suite to be on the lane, because the front lot line is actually the lane in this case. And this property, I believe, the suite is rented and the owner lives in the main house. This is on Beachcomber Lane behind Glassford Road. In this case, the owner lives on the property and the garden suite is a short-term rental. And yeah, there were no variances issued for this property. It's an interesting one in that I've shown the top floor layout though, because they've met the 75% floor area on the top floor by having a cutout and a covered deck at the house side. And this suite on Camellia Way was issued 2 variances. One for the suite to be larger than the principal dwelling, because the principal dwelling was a small cottage at the front of the property, and also a variance to allow the height to be measured from the lane as opposed to the average grade. And that was an argument was made for accessibility, to be able to access the suite from the lane. This is now actually on the market, as was pointed out by the homeowner when I asked permission to share. And the garden suite is now being marketed as the main home. So it's an unexpected outcome, but seems to be working. This suite is on Beachcomber Lane, again behind behind Gower Point and Glassford Road. And this suite was issued 3 variances. It is built on top of a new garage, and the garage is also a workshop with a high ceiling. And so the variances were for the top floor to be 100% of the main floor, for an addition in height, and for an addition to the floor area. And typically floor area is limited to 90 square meters. This is a very interesting suite that we were lucky to get a tour of the other day on Persephone Lane. It's a passive home. It's got a green roof and often has deer on the roof, apparently. This is above South Fletcher, and this was built by the son of the lot owner, who has built it as his home to live and share the lot with family. This suite you'll probably recognize as a project with the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society on Franklin Road on the town land that was created through a lane right-of-way. And it's under construction right now with a garden suite on the lane and the principal dwelling and secondary suite on Franklin Road. This is second last, I believe, Burns Road. This is a large corner lot, and there was a garage in this location, and the garage was converted to a garden suite, which I believe is a long-term rental. This suite is a panhandle lot off of below North Fletcher, and this was a garage, and it's been converted to a long-term rental. And the homeowner provided a picture of and actually she provided several photos to share, but I've shared one with you. Now, in terms of next steps for the review, with council's direction, staff will undertake an evaluation of the success of the Garden Suite program to date in relation to the goals and objectives identified at the outset of the program, and to community satisfaction with the program learned through consultation. Staff proposed to focus the review on development permit guidelines and the application process, on zoning bylaw regulations, including the garden suite area boundaries, and town costs associated with the development of a garden suite, including the fees and development cost charges. In order to review the success of the program from multiple perspectives, staff recommend that council direct staff to obtain input from stakeholders, including past applicants and residents in and adjacent to the garden suites areas through targeted surveys, and a summary of the feedback received and a review of outcomes under the current regulations will be presented in a report to the PDC, along with draft amendments to improve the program's efficiency and success in meeting the original objectives of providing market purpose-built rental units. And that concludes my presentation of the report. These are the recommendations, including that the report be received, of course, that staff be directed to gather stakeholder input and prepare the draft amendments, and finally that the recommendation be forwarded directly to tonight's council meeting. And thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Kirsten. Okay, can I get a motion to receive the report, please? Control, Mayor Beamish, thank you. All in favor? Councilor, thank you. Okay, open for discussion. And Councilor DeAndrade.
Thank you. It's one I would like just a clarification, because on page 4, it says proposed review, and there are 3 items, right? Which is the development permit guidelines and application process, the zoning bylaw regulations, and the town costs. But then there's mention on the program goals. And to me, the program goals are provision of purpose-built rental housing, additional housing choice, and all this, right? Improvement of the character and streetscape of laneways. So I particularly would like to have all these goals embedded in the review. Actually, I was quite happy to see that the majority of the garden suites that you show, it's being used for actual rental, right? Or for housing or member of the family. So somehow right now, at least the ones you showed responded, at least the first, but I think it's important in a review that all these items are included. And another observation that I just want to, because we are dealing right now with the other legislation with short-term rentals, and my understanding is the main goal of the garden suite was to provide housing. So I'm just going to leave it there because I think this is really important that we don't lose perspective. Right now is looking good so far, but I think it's an important point that should be attached. Thank you.
Thank you. Corporate Officer, you came on there for a minute. Did you want to add something?
No, it was just a quick reminder to council that the short-term rentals bylaw is still has just been the subject of a public hearing and has not yet received 3rd reading or adoption, and just that discussion needs to be careful in that area.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments? Councillor Kroll?
For staff, so currently there just is, as far as you know, one of the 11 garden suites that's actually being used for short-term rental. Is that correct?
May I? Sorry.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't feel I can speak confident. This is through what we know is what I shared, what's been shared with us, but we don't keep a reporting on how they're being used. I would have to check Sue's stats, and so I couldn't speak to that very accurately, but and I also haven't kept a count. I apologize, but yeah, what I recall one in that list.
I would also just like people to remember that, and I know this is awkward now because of what our corporate officer just reminded us of, but even if a suite is being used as a short-term rental, it can also be helping on the housing spectrum by providing a mortgage helper to the people that own the property. And that's a really important aspect of that housing continuum as well. So it's just keep that in mind when we think about these things. And sorry, Kirsten, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to make another comment regarding Councillor DeAndre's comment?
Yeah, apologies. It began as a question, so I was prepared to respond. But I just wanted to say that we have the same goal, and that was, we were attempting to communicate that. And I think that the review of the bylaws and the regulations was intended to reflect directly on the goals and how well they're being achieved through those.
Thank you. Others have comments they'd like to share or thoughts about the recommendations being put forward? Cliff, yes.
Sorry, just finding the unmute there. I just want to say that based on the slideshow, I'm really impressed with the buildings that have gone in, especially the passive home. I think that's excellent. So I think in terms of especially the the green or environmental component of what the goals laid out are, it seems very successful in that regard. My one question really though is about the areas. I'm looking at the map where garden suite areas are indicated. I'm just wondering why it doesn't include more areas. I guess I might be wading into this a little bit late after this has already been discussed, but I mean, I know for instance on my street and in my laneway, the fact is there are laneway homes, and I don't know if even that should reflect that they already exist.
Great question, Cliff. That was going to be mine too. So.
I suppose I'll take that as well, if I may.
Yeah.
unless you'd rather, Leslie Ann. Um,
Go ahead.
I think that there's not a clear, I did search when I was looking back on the background of the project for a clear definition of how the garden suite areas were defined. And what I found was that it seems to have been framed around lanes to begin. And then based on some sort of targeted meetings with neighborhoods, areas were added or dropped, and it was sort of seen as a starting place and a testing ground. So it was never seen as the ultimate collection of areas to include. It was more of a starting place to try it out.
Okay, thank you. Director of Planning, do you want to add to that?
No, she answered that really well. It was areas did get dropped because of neighborhood consultation, is my understanding.
Okay.
But Kirsten covered it.
When will part of the consultation this round be, will one of the goals be to establish kind of criteria for areas that can be included or not? Is that kind of like the idea of laneways being part of the rationale behind designating an area for a coach house?
Yeah, so it definitely, it could be, we see that as something that could be very beneficial because we do get a lot of inquiries about could I be considered for a garden suite. So if council wanted to pursue criteria as a goal of an outcome that we're trying for, that could be done.
Okay. Mayor Beamish, did you have anything to add? I don't know if your hand's been up or not.
No, I think that last point was a good one that I think we should take a look at the, revisit the purpose of garden suites and locations, and if it results in an expansion or even allows those properties that have garden suites that may not be an included area to be recognized as garden suites for whatever purpose. So that,
Okay, great. So unless anyone has any other comments they'd like to add, we've got two recommendations before us. And that's that staff be directed to gather stakeholder input and prepare draft amendments to the garden suite regulations. And further, that these recommendations be forwarded to tonight's council meeting for adoption. Does somebody want to move those? Councillor Kroll? Someone else want to second it? Councillor DeAndrade? Okay, all in favor? Okay, great. Great, thanks for some. By the way, I really enjoyed seeing all those photos. I recognized a lot of them from being on the APC with you, isn't it? So it was fun to see them actually built. Thanks for that. Councillor DeAndrade?
Sorry, just a clarification. The criteria of the locations, do we need to make a recommendation, or because this is not part of the recommendations or this is just?
I kind of felt like they got that.
I've noted it, and we can include that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the next report. This is, I believe, is Sue going to be presenting this to us?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, hi, Sue.
Hi there. Hi. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, so we've got the proposed new anti-noise bylaw being presented to us by Sue Booth, our bylaw officer.
Thank you very much. So on July the 14th, following some letters sent to council regarding construction noise, council had us staff to come back to look at the noise bylaw. So what we've done essentially is, as well as addressing maybe some revised construction noise, also changed it up a little bit because the bylaw itself was 40 years old and quite outdated. And I saw this as a good opportunity to perhaps elaborate on some of the specific complaints we get with power tools as well as the fact that a lot of residents believe that the existing bylaw always talked about 11 p.m. as being the time where you had to be quiet, which it didn't then, but that's something I thought was important to add. So I've gone ahead and proposed a new anti-noise bylaw, which I hope you'll have some comments, and maybe we can review the times that we're suggesting and have a discussion and let me know what you think.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I get a motion to receive this report, please? Councillor Kroll, Mayor Beamish, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, open for discussion. Mayor Beamish.
I guess I have a number of things, but one is that in terms of construction specifically, one of the challenges we've had on the coast, obviously, is consistency. And I noticed that if we're proposing a 7:30 start, in Gibsons on construction, Seashell still has a 7 o'clock start, and I believe the SCRD is a 7 o'clock start. So one of the things that I know that the contractors have consistently asked us for is consistency in terms of our bylaws, such as the building codes and things of that nature. And so that they don't have to figure out what side of the street am I on in terms of when we can start a project. Do note that sometimes, those timings, and it has been in other communities, and I couldn't put my finger on one as I was reading this, but they do have summer winter hours, some communities, so that because in the summer it is easier to start earlier with daylight, whereas in the winter a 8 o'clock start might make more sense than a 7 o'clock start. But it's just one of those things to think of. I'm not particularly in favor of a 7:30 construction start. I think 7 o'clock is probably fine. Because even at 7:30, the next paragraph, and I'm looking at 4.1 construction hours, the next paragraph says that if you start at 7:30, well, I guess the Saturday is when you can't you have to start at 8 o'clock, a half hour later at 8 on a Saturday. Yeah, I just I look through the bylaw and I see several different time frames that staff or you are going to have to interpret as to what it is we're doing. Is it myself coming home after a day's travel and cutting the grass after 6 o'clock at night? In order to have it done on a Saturday or Sunday night sort of thing, and then be, or a Sunday or a holiday, and be against the bylaw sort of thing at that point in time. So there's different things to look at on that. There are a lot of people who work during the day and cutting the grass in the evening is what they do, and whether it's a statutory holiday or a Sunday, and just a number of different things there that in my view, too many timeframes is what I mentioned. I'd rather have one time frame from Monday to Friday and one for Saturday and statutory holidays as in terms of timeframes, and so they can be very clear as to where we are. I also noticed, interesting enough, that the Seashell bylaw recognizes New Year's Eve as a celebration night, and they allow noise to carry on until 1 a.m. on New Year's Eve, which is interesting. It's interesting they recognize that, but it also makes some sense, is that you don't get a bunch of people complaining at 11:30 that the party next door is still going on. So something to think about.
Okay, thank you. Others? Councillor DeAndrade?
Yeah, my comment was about the power equipment noise up to 9 p.m. I find 9 p.m. quite late. I understand that, some people may work late, but then we can, people work in so many different schedules. If we're trying to accommodate everybody, I think it's going to be a challenge. I share the understanding with Mayor Beamish to make more consistent, easier for interpretation. But I particularly would like to move the 21 hours to 20. When you have kids, when you're trying to have a routine, or 29 is quite late, I find.
Okay, thank you. Others?
Sorry, if I could just comment once more. That's the one that got me there too. Power equipment. You can start up your construction site at 7:30, but you can't start up your power equipment on the site until 8 o'clock. Is that what I'm interpreting that, Sue?
That wasn't the intent, actually, Mr. Mayor. It was more for homeowners that are doing maybe work on their house or using tools, just not an actual construction site.
Okay.
I think there is some wording in there that differentiates between for-profit versus not, and I think that was kind of.
Oh, yeah, I did see that wording. Yeah, sure, yeah.
I remember correctly, something like that. So I understood that. Cliff or Councillor Kroll, do you guys have thoughts?
I sort of agree with Mayor Beamish on consistency, and I appreciate what Sue's tried to do here, because, you know, in our neighborhood, we've had 4 houses go up in the last 2 years. So, you know, we've been living in a construction zone almost continuously. If it's not a construction zone, it's, you know, neighbors with noisy motorbikes, or, you know, the past 2 days has been the neighbors with their hedge trimmers. You know, so it's, if you hear noise in the background, that's what it is. What I might suggest, you know, with respect to what Mayor Beamish was saying, if there is construction going on in a neighborhood, I don't know if it's adding too much to the bureaucracy of almost asking for a variance. When I'm working in the film industry, if you were in a neighborhood and there was going to be noise beyond a certain time, you applied for a noise variance permit. And the neighbors in, you know, within a, you know, 50-meter range were advised that a new construction was going to be happening, and to sort of expedite things, they asked for a permit, and it was granted. And you know, it sort of eliminated people in the immediate area complaining because, you know, suddenly a house is being built. So I don't know if that adds to the complexity of, you know, dealing with the situation, but, you know, it's regrettable that some of the letters of complaint that we've had with respect to housing is for affordable housing. Yeah. So it's, you know, and obviously people should have known it was going to happen, but if a permit had been issued for you know, a variance with, you know, noise variance, would that have made life easier for people?
I'm going to go to the Director of Planning. Just, I think you might want to comment on that one, and then I'll hop over to you, Cliff.
Thank you, Councillor Ledwig. So in terms of the variance process, that is a specific process to a zoning bylaw or a subdivision and a development bylaw. There is a provision in this noise bylaw, which is 4.1C, the second paragraph in there. It says, where it is impossible or impractical to comply with this section, the municipal building inspector or bylaw enforcement officer may give written approval to carry on the work. So there is a little bit of discretion for the bylaw officer to prepare a letter and allow a change to the time, but it's very specific, and she has done that in the past for some projects.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to jump over to Cliff for a second.
Sure, I was only going to add that I think that, you know, my experience, 7 a.m. starting construction is extraordinarily common, but addressing the mayor's comments to that, a 7 a.m. start with prohibition on power tools or banging out concrete, things like that is often common, you know, until 7:30 or 8 a.m. So especially on a Saturday, I think I've seen it work that way in many municipalities. So I think that's a fair way of handling it. The other thing I would say is that, you know, noise regulations, you know, you're just never going to find time to satisfy everybody and every interest. So ultimately somebody's just going to be unhappy with it, right? I think, you know, I think the ones being proposed seem entirely reasonable, but, you know, I'd support anything that is agreed upon.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kroll, did you have another comment?
No, I'm okay for now.
Okay. I'm just looking at the, so I wrote out all, sorry if it's just jump in here for a sec. I wrote out all the different time slots that the bylaw proposes, both for construction, power equipment, and quiet hours. And I hear what Mayor Beamish is saying and wondering if there is some way of simplifying a little bit, but I'm kind of with Cliff. I think it is, I do think that the power equipment wording is a bit confusing. And if it is to stay, the Monday to Saturday wording should be separated out from the Sunday and holidays wording, because it's all combined. And so it's a little bit confusing, because on Monday and Saturday, you're allowed to operate equipment from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And on, if I read it correctly, on Sunday and holidays, it's 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And perhaps that needs to be separated. Oh, I see our CAO. Maybe I've done something wrong.
Not at all. I would just maybe wanted to make a suggestion that we add a little table that sort of the types of noises and the hours and so on, just a quick reference.
That would be
might
helpful.
make life easier for folks as well. Thank you.
Well, I actually wanted to talk about the quiet hours, which no one has brought up. That's actually the one that I struggle with the most. And I don't know how others feel about this. I know that from a consistency standpoint, the whole, need to be quiet from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. is what's consistent. That's the one I struggle with. I mean, I don't know why people need to be making noise outside until 11 p.m. on a regular basis, like why that has to be in there in the first place. Like I would personally be more comfortable with 10 p.m. I think, we live in a community that's very quiet. And if you have people that sit out on their deck in the summer months for day after day after day, just even talking and hanging out and socializing till 11 p.m. and you've got to get up at 6 a.m. to go to work, it can be frustrating, but they're not doing anything wrong. I mean, I know where I live, I can literally hear a rope slapping against a mast down in the marina. It's just, we live in an amphitheater bowl, and so noise carries very well in Lower Gibsons. And when you get somebody living next door that just chooses to socialize outside on a regular basis, it can be it can be impactful in your quality of life. No longer do you sleep with the windows open and that sort of thing. So that's the one that I'm personally struggling with, but I also understand and hear the mayor's comment about consistency. So
yeah, I wouldn't mind like the quiet hours. I think that and maybe that's what we have to look at, and it's just a general context. Quiet hours on a Monday to Friday,
that's what I'm
different than quiet hours on a weekend.
that's what
And maybe that's all we have to consider ourselves of the two time frames is what we have. We often you'll note when we have events in town, and I know that we've had it an awful lot. A lot of calls come in from neighbors of whether it's the public market with the music or the Dougal Park with music and stuff like that. Sometimes it just depends on the kind of music. Some people who don't like rock and roll complain, but they're okay if it's jazz music, and then you get another group of people complaining. So it's kind of interesting that way. But if we were to look for the different time frames of quiet hours, I think that might make some sense. Used to be easy, but now with shift work and everything else like that, it's not easy because there's different times that people are actually going to bed. So when we say disturb the sleep of, I've worked in communities where that sleep of is say, look, I didn't get off shift till 6 o'clock at night, and I go into bed at 8 o'clock, and my sleep's being disturbed. Other people, they are just starting work, and they go to bed at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning, and their sleep gets disturbed right away. So that they get problem. But somehow we have to work with that in a community. We have a mill which probably has shift work.
I agree, but generally speaking, you do have children in school. There is so I totally do agree with you. We've also got people working in restaurants late and different shifts there. But like Cliff is saying, you're never going to make everybody happy, and there is kind of you got to work with what the majority is. And so I do like that approach, Mayor Beamish, of kind of focusing on weekday quiet hours and weekend hours. Councillor DeAndrade.
I just want to remind that Friday, it's usually, we have to think about that because usually Friday is a party day and Sunday it's not, you're prepared. So the Monday to Friday has to be, this has to be thought. Another way of, I think, addressing this issue, I'm not saying that it's easier, is to think the main goals of our community, right? So, we are, during summer, we are very touristic. It's an economy, right? So we need to have some flexibility, right? And so on. So we also have a construction going on, but frankly, if you're living 2-3 years around construction, there's a big impact. So we need to take this into consideration. So it's not about satisfying, I think it's about weighing the pros and cons and trying to balance this. That's the way it is. A little bit more difficult to make a decision, but I think that's how decisions should be made. It's not all one person or another, nobody's going to be satisfied. But if everybody can compromise a little bit, but we see the overall impact and how can we manage the impact? I think it's about impact, right?
I agree. What if we just chose a time that worked for power tools and construction noise, like, and you know, I mean, maybe this is a conversation to have with Seashelt and the SCRD too. Like maybe they're ready to review their noise bylaws too. Maybe not. But if we pick something that was in the middle, like 7:30 to 8 p.m. for all of that stuff, that seems reasonable to me. I mean, I don't know many construction crews that go beyond that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then quiet hours. So that would just be construction, because you can't ask people not to be out on their deck past, you know, the people that doesn't work for quiet hours, but maybe just reduce the quiet hours to 10 p.m. or something during the week and later on the weekends. Sorry, I'd have to think that through. But so if we had 2 sets of numbers for construction and power equipment for both weekdays and weekends, and 2 sets of numbers for just general quiet hours, weekdays and weekends. Councillor Crowell?
I sort of like the CAO's suggestion of, you know, if just a simple table was put together, it would be easier to review than wading through pages of words. You know, not to, you know, I think Sue's tried to cover all the bases and she's done a really good job of it, but I just think if, you know, just being able to glance at a table and then make a couple of simple tweaks and it's done.
Agreed.
And my apologies, I was trying to get it. I only have, this was my little table. And I if I had more time, I would have got it on the agenda. So
Not to
we'll make
worry.
it a lot clearer.
You know,
I was
really
thrilled to
appreciate-
see this on the agenda so quickly. So thank you. It's a great start.
You know, I really appreciate what Sue's done to get it this far, but I think, you know, simple table and it can come back for a review and it's a done deal.
Agreed. Okay, Director of Planning.
Say something.
And then I'm going to go over to Cliff because he had his hand up. But Director of Planning, did you?
Yes, please. Thank you, Councillor Ladwig. So I'm taking notes here and I just want to share them to make sure I'm capturing the direction appropriately. So what I'm hearing is you'd like to see consistency with construction hours and power equipment tools. And what I've written down here is the consistency would be weekdays. Working hours would be either 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 7 to 8 p.m. So if we want consistency with the District of Seashelt and the SCRD, we're looking at 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So we need some direction on what that starting hour would be. And then Sunday and holidays would be 9 to 6 p.m. There was discussion about 6 p.m. being too early to shut off lawnmowers and things like that. But just to add to that, this would be based on complaints. So it's not that you cannot mow your lawn at 6 p.m., but if your neighbor is a shift worker or something like that, and we do get a complaint, then we would act on it. But we're not going to drive around town looking for lawnmowers at 6 p.m. and start ticketing. So that's something to consider. And then in terms of the quiet hours, what I have written down here, we could recognize New Year's Eve. I think that's a really good idea. And then also we could rework it so that it's Sunday to Thursday. The quiet hours would be 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then Friday, Saturday, and potentially statutory holidays. I don't know if we want to throw that in there as well. Quiet hours would be 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. So just giving a bit more time at nighttime and a bit more quiet time in the morning. Does that capture what was said so that we can bring back a bylaw that works? And we can put in a table as well, for sure.
It covers my sleep time, so I'm okay.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I would personally say that I think anything can go till 8 o'clock. Like, I don't think it has to end that early, because I think Mayor Beamish is right. People do get off work at 5:30 and they need to mow their lawn. I think anything can go to 8. That's reasonable. After that, there really shouldn't be much of a need to have power anything running, really, I don't think. Cliff, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I guess, to make sure that I'm clear and understanding it correctly, that there is a distinction between, construction done by a construction company under a permit and, me at home using power tools to build something, right? Like, I guess I would want to make sure that there's no confusion that that's not prohibited for me to do that on a Sunday, right? I can still run power tools. That doesn't fall under construction. That's powered equipment, I guess. I guess maybe I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding.
My understanding is that yes, you could on the weekend, or maybe not on Sunday. Are we saying not on? I know, I think people need to be able to operate equipment on a Sunday personally. Because yeah, people want to rent. Okay, sorry, Director of Planning.
No problem. So power equipment, as in my notes here, what we would bring forward, power equipment would be allowed on Sundays from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Sundays and stat holidays. So if you're running a power equipment, if you're mowing your lawn at 7 p.m. and your neighbor doesn't like it and calls in, then we would act on it.
Sure, but similarly, like running a power saw or something, that falls under power equipment, not construction, I guess.
Exactly. That's right.
Okay.
And then for construction, there's quiet hours for construction, and that's Sunday. So there's no construction on Sunday.
No commercial
for gain or profit, exactly, for commercial construction.
Yeah.
Is that statutory holidays as well, or just Sunday?
And holidays, Sundays and holidays. And Sue, jump in here anytime.
Part of the challenge comes, and a lot of the rules around big cities are going to be different. But I know that my son working construction in Vancouver, those are overtime hours for him. Not a Sunday, but certainly a stat day. It can be overtime hours, and they run 10-hour shifts over there right now. So it can be different in big cities. But we're not a big city, and I think we have to recognize that we have a preponderance of seniors in this community that deserve the rest, have earned their rest.
Well, and not only that, but sound echoes here. We're very quiet. Like I having lived in the city, some of that gets muffled just by the general sound of a city life.
That's true.
Yeah. It is quite different here. Councillor Kroll.
Just for clarification, so you're saying a homeowner, can you run a router from 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning till 6 o'clock on Sunday evening? Is that correct?
That is correct, as it's proposed.
But if you don't like it, then I would have to call the bylaw enforcement officer on a Sunday to deal with it.
Yeah, but she wouldn't be at work, so out of luck.
So what do? Do you record it so we can present evidence of this inconsiderate, thoughtless neighbor?
I'd rather not do that. I mean, I think it's a question of going and talking to that person and just making them realize the impact that it has. Whilst at the same time allowing someone to pursue a hobby, for instance.
Like, case in point, and I don't know if you could hear it. Were you home on Sunday, Illyria?
This last Sunday, I can't even remember. No, I wasn't.
Okay.
No.
But, we experienced someone using a router or something similar to that for about 8 hours on Sunday.
Oh, I live next. I'm experiencing something very similar, Councillor Kroll, all the time. Could be someone banging a metal.
So, it's this sort of thing that, because we don't have bylaw usually on weekends. So your home handyman with his router or whatever, that's when it becomes an issue. So I think there needs to be something in the bylaw that, you can only run this stuff for a certain number of hours, because, it does get a bit silly. And that's when people get cranky. Oh, wait a minute. Am I cranky? Yes, you're right. I am.
Councillor DeAndrade, and I'm just going to close the door behind me, folks. I will be listening to Councillor DeAndrade.
I have one is a question, what social campaign means. I just wanted to make sure if there's anything going on the newspaper, just considering that some people don't have computers. The second thing is, because it's a noise bylaw, I think we have to take into account the decibels, right? Decibels is how you say the sound
Elves.
Sorry?
Decibels.
Sorry.
Decibels.
I said Portuguese. Okay, the decibels. And I think that's, and I'm not saying it's hard to measure, but at the same time, we can see a difference of the two, right? If I'm using my small tool and someone using a bigger one. And I don't know, I don't have the answer right now, but I think this is one of the ways that you look at the impact, because there are consequences to other people. Certain sounds to a certain height can make over time impact the health of other people, whether psychologically or physically. So I'm just going to leave it there, because that could respond this kind of sound that Councillor Crow mentioned.
So I totally agree with you in principle. The problem is enforceability. Like, how do you enforce that? It's not like everyone's got a decibel meter at home. And
no, but I think you can understand the kinds of tools that produce certain sounds. And I'm not saying that we're going to have an answer tomorrow, but I think that's to me, when I look at a bylaw, a noise bylaw, it's about the noise, and the noise, certain noises have health impacts.
okay, Councillor Crolla, and then Sue, are you trying to say?
All I was going to suggest is if something could be incorporated sort of as a good neighbor noise policy, that, some consideration be exercised if you're using, extremely, the other day at the town hall, there was someone using a router and, talking to staff, you couldn't even hear them.
Yeah.
And that was, and apparently was going on for, the better part of a couple of days. So I think, there needs to be something incorporated into it for consideration of your neighbors, and, just sort of a good neighbor policy. And Sue's looking perplexed, but I'm sure you can, with a clever way of wording it, that, people just take into consideration that, you have neighbors and be considerate of them.
Yes,
Yes.
respect-
Yes. Yeah. Sue, it's yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you. So the idea of creating these hours was just to give myself or any other staff some sort of guidelines, because right now, the way it stands, it's wide open. It's anything, anytime that disturbs rest, peace, enjoyment. So then you find that you have to be the judge of that. So by giving some sort of hours gives us a better, a reply to somebody who's having this issue. What I would say to Councillor Kroll there is that we can always fall back to that first section. So anything that disturbs rest, peace, enjoyment, because it might be excessive use. I mean, someone that's taking full advantage of those hours, where we're not exactly saying you can do it all day long. That seems unreasonable to me. So we could fall back to that original section of noise which disturbs. And as far as decibels go, I reached out to our bylaw association with that question. I figured it might come up. Back in the day, that was the thing that was done. Bylaw officers were issued with decibel readers. They're very expensive. They have to be calibrated. An officer would have to go off coast for training twice a year to maintain that ticket. And it's sort of gone by the way of the dodo now. And I know everybody has these apps on their phones. And I mean, they're a good guideline. If you take Health Canada regulations, they probably have a decibel level that might be, but what I was feeling was, when it's noisy. And if we get a number of complaints on a certain property, I would rather not go down that decibel road, because then we'd have to incorporate it in the bylaw too. Whereas I think having it more open to interpretation is definitely easier for staff. And this is not all about making my job easier, just giving some guidelines.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've got a couple of recommendations before us. I don't think we're not ready to take this to council for first, second, and third reading, or to recommend that. So we need to make some adjustments. Should it be that the noise bylaw number 1285 2020 come back to this committee, or come back to this committee?
Come back to the committee. Yeah.
Come back to this committee with a table outlining specific time recommendations as per our discussion. I don't know if that's too vague. Director of Planning?
That is too vague, unfortunately. I'll need a bit more direction than that on what you would like, what timelines you'd like to hear. I've heard a number of different things. I've heard consistency with CSHELT and the SCRD. I've also heard consistency between power equipment and construction hours, but I've also heard not consistent, like to give more exceptions for power equipment. And then Sunday and stat holidays, I've heard ending at 6 p.m. is good. I've also heard ending at 8 p.m. is good. So we do need some more direction on what hours specifically. If you want to change what's been proposed, then we need to know what you'd like to change so we can bring back a bylaw
Okay.
that you're looking for.
So I'm going to take a crack at part of it, and then maybe others can jump in. So the anti-noise bylaw come back to this committee with a table highlighting hours of restriction from Monday to Thursday and Friday to Sunday. For construction, did the committee decide to separate power equipment, or we're separating that out, right? For construction from Monday to Friday. I think the construction, well, we didn't decide what, so Mayor Beamish, you raised issues with the 7:30. I'm okay with the 7:30, but I don't know what we want to do with that. I would prefer that we go to SCRD and CSHELT and ask them to look at their noise bylaw than just conform to meet their noise bylaw.
Actually, like what Cliff had suggested, at 7 o'clock start is fine, because there's a lot goes into startup of a construction site. It's not, but you know, quite frankly, having lived in a construction site for the last 4 years, it's the hammering that creates the biggest noise. It's not the, it's the power hammer or the straight hammering. So that, or it's that backup delivery of materials from GBS at 7 o'clock in the morning outside your window that's going beep, beep. That's your wake up call, and you don't get to sleep after that. So that those things do happen, and those deliveries where there's concrete or GBS, they sometimes don't wait for man or horse. Yeah.
So you're wanting to stick with 7?
I'm okay with 7 for that on a weekday, but not on a weekend. On a weekend, I think we should go to 8. I think the hours should be considerably shortened on a weekend, and whether it's 8 to 8 works for me. 9 to 8 works for me on a weekend.
Okay, and Sue, right now, does the construction, is it different on weekends, the bylaw?
As it stands right now, or with the proposed one, sorry?
With the current one, right?
With the current one is 7 a.m. till 10 p.m., Monday to Saturdays.
Right. Because I do want to reflect the expression of frustration that we have heard from members of the community about this. Like, we received that letter of the woman that's going to be living next to Gospel Rock, and I sympathize.
Yeah, it's not for a long time though. I mean, and then you know, quite frankly, I mean, you live with it. It's having lived with it for a long time. It could be the more annoying thing is going to be your next door neighbor who's continually building stuff in the garage. Maybe he's got a small business going on the weekend, sort of thing. He's continually building. That's never going to go away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could live with the 7 a.m. Monday to Friday if we were going to reduce it to on weekends. I think that if that's a compromise, that
That's
for construction. How do others feel about that? I'm looking at Councillor DeAndrade and
I don't think anybody works. Do any of these sites work late, Sue? I mean, nothing that I saw here. We saw sites working after 6 o'clock even.
I would say even after 5 o'clock, Mr. Mayor, we
Yeah.
don't really see anything going on. And it is a balance always, you know, do you reduce the hours and then have construction for a long time? Or do you expand the hours and get it done, built much faster? And so it's a real fine line there. But what we were hearing from the public was that they thought 7 was too early, but that is consistent with the SCRD and District of Sechelt. And actually most other bylaws I looked at is a 7 o'clock start. And not all of them start at 7. I think in the summertime you would want to do that. But up to you.
Councillor Kroll?
I was just going to say that it's useful if we have the delineation between for-profit and what, would be considered, the average homeowner.
Okay. So can I see a show of hands for the 7 a.m. start? Are people comfortable with the 7 a.m.?
I'm comfortable with 7 a.m.
Okay. I think I can do it if it's Monday to Friday. I think it should be reduced on weekends.
And statutory holidays.
And
Statutory.
Yeah. Okay, so
Excuse, just one interruption. The only time that there would be exceptions and this is just from my own experience, is if people are doing like a concrete pour. A lot of times, if they get a late start for something, they may have to run late. But, I think generally that's pretty rare. Usually they try and, fit them in the window. But
Well, the other project you're going to see is a highway project going through. They may work late. They may work overnight.
or start very early.
They may need a permit for that.
But that's okay. It's like you said, it's temporary. Nobody, I think the thing is the long term. Can I just confirm we are differentiating construction, which is short term, let's define, right? Even if it's two-year big projects gonna end, from ongoing activities, so I think we will have 2 tables, right? Or whatever, a table that people can easily see the difference between the everyday. And if the way I'm understanding is, let's see that I'm gonna have even a big project in my house that I'm gonna be banging every day, I should get some sort of a permit, right?
No.
No?
Are you referring to a building permit?
Yes, we are distinguishing between commercial construction for profit and everyday, what do we call it? Operating of equipment, which would be more personal use.
Okay.
So we are differentiating between that.
The
I
homeowners.
understand, but let's see that I think I'm just hypothetically, let's say that I decide to build a garage with friends. So it's a personal project.
Right, but it's not for profit.
Okay, so I would be able to go on the weekend and keep going?
Until nothing. So I'm proposing, so we're saying 7 a.m. for construction noise, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturdays, and none on Sundays and statutory holidays. For personal use, we're saying, well, do we want to stick with the 7 a.m. for personal use?
8. I don't know. I think the consideration that Mayor Bimish was pointed out, it's really changed, right?
It's short term. Yeah, okay, correct. So personal use is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to, well, it'd be the same schedule.
Same hours essentially. Yeah, I'd say yeah.
Same schedule. And then for quiet hours, we're saying 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Thursday.
We're just saying 10 p.m. till 7 a.m.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then Friday to Sunday, that goes back to 11. It could even go to midnight for all I care on the weekend. But
let's start at 11, then in few years it changed to midnight.
Unless they've been, and there's a provision to issue people a permit if they want to do, if the market's going to go with see, it was a night market that was getting calls, as I recall, and things of that nature. Well, give them a permit to carry on.
Yeah. Do we have it? I don't remember seeing anything in the bylaw about getting a permit if people want to.
Well, it is under 4.1, but strictly on construction. So maybe we have to have it in some other form as well. The last paragraph.
Right. Okay. And then a timeline extension for noise can be requested via permit. Okay, Director of Planning.
Thank you. So we can add a provision for written approval. So it wouldn't be a permit, but it would be a letter signed by the bylaw officer or building inspector. And then in terms of quiet hours, did you want to recognize New Year's Eve and establish some hours around that for an exception?
Yep.
Okay. What are the hours?
Same as
Seashell 1 a.m. 1 a.m. on New Year's Eve in Seashell.
Yeah.
1 a.m. in Seashell? Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Councillor.
Okay.
I was just going to suggest if we're going with this permit route, that there should be a fee associated with it, because otherwise anyone who wants to make noise is just going to ask for a variance, and staff are going to be overwhelmed with issuing these letters. So if there's a relevant fee, it might discourage people twice about making noise outside of the timelines. I can cite you a very attractive example. A film unit paid $28,000 for a noise variance in downtown Vancouver to film beyond 1 a.m.
Well, that sounds like a good fee.
That sounds good.
Start there. Yeah. It'll be awfully
No,
quiet.
but I mean, it's going to create work for staff. So, I think there needs to be, if people are going to be running in every 10 minutes wanting a variance, there should be something to work as a deterrent for, just asking for a variance to make noise.
I think there should be a commercial variance and a homeowner variance, two different things. So like we do get the film industry over here, and they do work outside of hours. And I don't know if our policy provides for a variance of that nature, but yeah.
That is a great point, though. We could have gotten money off that one down in the down in the marina.
Yeah.
Councillor DeAndrade.
Just a clarification. I didn't hear domestic noise on the weekends. And also, like, just to confirm if the social media campaign include an ad on the newspaper.
I can speak to that if you like. We are in the process of doing a mail out to all residents, which anticipated at the beginning of September, to let them know about the new bylaws and other items of interest. And this might be the perfect one to include at that time if it's passed by then.
Good idea.
Yeah.
And the clarification of on the weekend for domestic noise for nonprofit or.
We're saying the domestic noise, the power equipment is the same. It'll be, no, we pushed it back to 8. Did we push it back to 8?
Well, I don't know, on the weekend.
Yeah. No, but even during the week, I think we pushed it because
the week we pushed
so
to 8.
8 to 8, Monday to Saturday, or Monday to Friday.
No, 7 to 8, Monday to Friday.
No, we said 8 for domestic.
Okay.
Director of Planning.
I've got some notes here from the discussion. So for what I've got for construction, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Saturday, Sunday, and statutory holidays. Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Saturday, Sunday, and stat holidays not for gain or profit is 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then Sunday and stat holidays for gain or profit are quiet hours.
Yep.
Is what I have for construction. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So for power equipment, I've got Monday to Friday, 8 to 8. And then Saturday, Sunday, and stat holidays, 9 to 6 for power equipment.
I think anything can go to 8. 8 p.m.
9 to 8.
Yeah, I mean, people need to mow their lawn on weekends, and they might be. I think 8. Anything to 8 is fine.
Okay. And then quiet hours, Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Friday to Sunday, 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. And then New Year's Eve is an exception to 1 a.m. And then a provision for written approval with a fee.
That worked for me.
Yeah, sounds good.
Councillor Kroll has got a comment.
I just want to throw in a little anecdote. For very briefly, we lived in West Vancouver, and I was cutting our grass on a Saturday morning, and the neighbor stuck her head over the hedge and said, "Excuse me, most people have their gardening done by professionals during the week when it doesn't disturb people." There was a local bylaw of no grass cutting on the weekends because it disturbed people who had the weekends off. You know, it's it's not as simple, but you know, come on, do you really have to cut your grass at 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening?
I don't know. Mine right now is my neighbor's going till 9. It drives me crazy.
Well, that
So
always,
you were the one who just extended it.
No, we extended to nothing past 8.
I know, but you know, what's wrong with 6 on a Sunday?
I like 6.
You know, I would like to be able to go out on my deck and have dinner in the evening, and I can't because for the last 2 months, the neighbor's out there every night with his weed eater, and he weed eats from.
Not every night.
You like 8?
Weeds don't grow.
No, I don't. I would
No, I'm
say
talking
6.
Bill or Mayor Beamish. Okay, see, I'm not. I'm the one that wanted to have this reviewed. If you want to go 6, we can go 6. 6 p.m.
I think 6 on a Sunday is reasonable.
So
I
I'm
did
changing this to
Sunday.
Saturday, Sunday, and statutory holidays for power equipment, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
I think
Yeah.
just Sundays and holidays.
So I've got Saturday, Sunday, and stat holidays for power equipment.
Oh.
So do you want?
You know,
Did you
we can
want?
cut some slack for Saturday, but I think
Saturday
Sundays
can be
and
8 to 8.
statutory holidays.
So Monday to Saturday would be 8 to 8 then, and then Sunday and stat holidays 9 to 6.
God, this table is. gonna be
Let's go with that for now, shall we?
Let's see what it looks like in a table.
Exactly. Let's see the table.
This is very important consideration, at least for the next 2 years. People will be at home way more. So that's okay. We need to allow, activities to continue, but there has to be room for a break, right?
Yeah, I agree. So can we work with what you've got there, Director of Planning? We'll bring it back, and if we have to bring it back again, we will. But it is hard with all these numbers and different people. I think seeing the table would be really helpful. So how do I make this motion then? If I can't say based on the conversation we had just had.
Let's see here. So I have written here, and that the noise bylaw come back to the Planning and Development Committee with a table highlighting hours of restriction as follows. And then I've got the list of the hours we discussed, including a provision for written approval with a fee. So maybe a written approval for an exception to the hours with a
Okay,
fee.
perfect. Does somebody want to move that? Councillor Kroll, thank you. Some second it. Councillor DeAndrade, all in favor? Thank you.
I think
And
in the meantime, if it's possible to put that out so that people can look at it and see if they have any comment when it comes back, that'd be useful.
I think we should at least review it before it goes out. I'd like to see it.
Okay, right. See it one more time because we're not going to see it till September then.
Well, I don't know.
But this video's out there.
Can we also make a motion that this will come, that the bylaw, notice enforcement bylaw will, or sorry, that the anti-noise bylaw will come back to this committee for a second review? Yep. Okay, thank you, Mayor Beamish. Seconded by Councillor DeAndrade. All in favor? Good. Good. Leave it at that then. Councillor Kroll.
It perhaps wouldn't hurt just to, for people who missed, that aren't sitting in the attendees to see this meeting or aren't watching it on YouTube, that if communications did put something on the website, that the bylaw is being reviewed and see what sort of feedback we get.
Yeah, I would support that if they want to go check it out. Sure.
It's not, it's a draft, it's a work in progress, but, to get people's input might be useful.
Are you making a motion?
I could make a motion that, do we need a motion for Elizabeth to do that?
It would be helpful.
Okay, I will make a motion that communications release that the current bylaw for noise is being reviewed, and we're going to be inviting public participation.
To go on the website. Okay. Someone want to second that?
Mayor Beamish second.
Mayor Beamish. Okay, all in favor? Okay. Good. Let's get off noise. Enough noise. Thank you so much, Sue. I really appreciate you bringing that to us so quickly. That was really great. I'm glad to see that a bylaw that hasn't been reviewed in 40 years is getting some attention. So that's great. Thank you very much. Okay. Now we're going to the Director of Planning to talk about a verbal report on the invasive and noxious weeds control bylaw number 1281. And I believe this is a verbal report, is it not?
Thank you, Councillor Ladwig. Yeah, so what happened here was this was brought to council and council kicked it back to PDC so there could be more of a discussion on it. What I've done is updated the bylaw, took out what was the Schedule B, which was the knotweed species because they're included in Schedule A, and then put in the Schedule B, which is the recommended list from the Sea to Sky Invasive Species Committee of invasive plants that should be regulated. So part of the discussion could be around whether the Schedule B should be included or not, and then anything else that this committee wants to discuss.
Okay. Thank you. Can I get a motion to receive the verbal report? Okay, Councillor Crowell. Mayor Beamish, all in favor? Okay. I will say that, so this report of course came in very late today and I myself haven't even had a chance to read it. So, I'm totally happy to receive it and I'm happy to have time to review it over the summer months, but I'm certainly not myself ready to make any recommendations about it because I haven't even read it yet. So, but it's good as a reference for future discussions, in my opinion. But obviously, I'll open it up to others for their thoughts. Councillor Crowell.
Thank you, Chair. I think actually this came up before at a meeting that you were absent at because it's the second time it's come back to committee. I think, it's really important that we get a handle on invasive species. The one big concern I have is that we need to come up with, and I think it's going to fall to the town to help give people direction in how to deal with it. When you go online and you look at some of the procedures for getting rid of knotweed, I did forward to the councillors. There's a very good little YouTube documentary on the benefits of knotweed. It's it's used in Asia for all sorts of medicinal reasons. And I suggested that we almost maybe should see if we can encourage a local business for processing of knotweed. It might be more profitable than medical cannabis. Anyway, that aside, but I think we need to come up with some direction for people. The green waste technically is not supposed to take it. The Seashell landfill will not take it. So what do people do with it? Run out to the garden supply and buy gallons of Roundup and pour that into the environment. So the knotweed is probably the most obnoxious to deal with. But I think we really need to, before we start running around, finding people for having it on their property, guilty, we have to have a means of dealing with it that's environmentally sensitive. I've got neighbors who, buy Roundup by the gallon. And to me, that's not the answer, because that's going to get into the groundwater. And, but I think, so that I agree with the bylaw, but I think we have to have a treatment protocol in place that we can offer people that is environmentally safe and financially, possible. You look at some of the elderly citizens in this town who have properties, and it's riddled with knotweed. And these people can least afford to bring in professionals to deal with it. So that's, I'm all for the bylaw, don't get me wrong, but I think we have to have a protocol in place that is environmentally sensitive and affordable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor DeAndretti.
Oh, thank you, Chair Ludwig. I appreciate where the conversation is going, because obviously I have great concerns with invasive species, but there are different kinds of invasive species, right? If I remove English ivy, even if I threw in the woods, it's a problem, but someone may see it and may remove. It's not it may take a long time for a real catastrophic event. When we talk about knotweed, we are encountering a really big area first. I don't think we should do anything without having the disposal sort out. We need, what I think should be the obvious, we have a place where we can burn it and it's safe. So we have a way that we can transport safely to the burning facility and burn. As a region, we must come up with the solution. Otherwise, we are just increasing the problem or spreading the problem. A second thing is knotweed requires different treatment, including with different species, and only a professional should be really doing that, or someone who is expert. So I wouldn't mind having even some teeth on the bylaw that say, if you have a knotweed, you have to treat, or we engage a company, and then perhaps we need to talk about a funding to bring, like the issue, for example, that Councillor Crowe just brought, that some people have knotweed, they don't have the means, but guess what? It's going to impact the whole town. So every citizen has vested interest. So this is not only a private problem, but we cannot compare knotweed with other invasive. And even other invasives, I would like a little bit of prescription, right? I don't think we can do mandatory, but then we suggest guidelines, because the way the bylaw is, not everybody knows how to dispose. For example, English holly, it's a quite invasive plant. If you throw in the forest, if you dispose improperly, you are just creating another problem in the future. So every species have their own idiosyncrasies. I think it is responsible that we kind of, understand, the damage that they can do regarding disposal, and the way, are we trying, that's another thing, are we trying to eradicate or control? Some species we will be able to eradicate, others not. We can just manage and control. So, but with knotweed, I think we cannot do anything before we have the disposal addressed, and this is an urgent matter.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Beamish, I thought you had your hand up, did you not?
Well, I didn't have, but it's I'm not sure that, I mean, we are one of, in fact, we're the smallest footprint on the Sunshine Coast in terms of communities. Everybody's got the problem. It's not just Gibsons. And everybody's been dealing with it. People have been pulling knotweed out. The SCRD dealt with Shasta Creek for a long time in Area E. And they had to dispose of that somewhere. And so that we're not the first ones to to identify knotweed as a noxious weed, and it exists across the property. It is interesting to me that that you can have a house, you can sell a house without having to declare whether you've got knotweed on your property, but you have to declare if you have growing marijuana in the house. So, which is interesting. So I would rather we start dealing with somewhere in that area so that there's a consistency as to how we deal with it across the board. Place the onus on the owners, property owners, to deal with it before they can transfer the property, before they can sell a property. If we have to provide a site for knotweed, we can't do it alone. We have to do it with a regional district or with the province. It's not a, it's, I mean, I know that Seashell has an eradication program because I know that they're Perry, forget his last name right now, but their head gardener. He was always attacking the knotweed infestations when he came across them, especially if they're on property. That material had to go somewhere and be dealt with. It could be put in contaminated bags, waste bags, so they can just sealed up. But it's not our problem to solve for the coast or for the universe. It's a significant problem everywhere, and I think we need to look at best practices and see what's been done elsewhere, and in order to deal with it. I do appreciate that it's hard to write a bylaw and say get rid of your knotweed and not provide an option. So we need to look at that. What is that option for where it can go? And you don't want every vehicle in town driving up to if we're gonna dispose of it through the gravel pit. They don't want the people going up there. They would want a central collection site and it being disposed of like that. So.
Just before I go to you, Councillor Kroll, I agree with everything you just said, Mayor Beamish. But I would really struggle with passing a bylaw right now without a place to dispose of it. Because I have to be honest, I didn't know. I have knotweed on my property half from the beginning. I've been tackling it for years and I've been bringing it to the green waste. I just didn't know. I had no idea. And that means, like, now that of course this is on my desk, I'm like, oh my God, I've been probably writing this stuff all over the place. And if we put this bylaw out, we're going to be, that's what everybody's going to do. So, I mean, I do think there's a big education piece that needs to go on here. And I think this would be a great thing for the newsletter that Sue was talking about earlier for us to include, even if we don't have a bylaw, just, hey, did you know that if you put this in your green waste, you're going to be spreading it all over God's green earth here. And so, you know, some education is definitely necessary, but I think until we can identify some disposal site, and if it is up wherever, or just a separate bin even, and then it gets burned, I don't know. But if we can't work with the SCRD to identify a disposal site, then we shouldn't be doing this. Or at least not.
I think on the other hand, I think we should be dealing with knotweed infestations. I mean, having single plants on properties is not as much of a problem as having significant areas of coverage, and that's why I thought the bylaw should have had something that said if you have a site that is greater than 10 square feet or something, or 20 square feet, then that has to be dealt with, because that's the ones the deers are getting in. That's the one the birds are carrying the flowers to the neighboring property. Those are significant, and we have many infestations like that in the community, and even on our own property. So we should be dealing with those.
Well, where do they take it?
It can go up to the, I think they will take it up at the burn. It used to be they'd take that material out to the mill. I don't know if they still use hog fuel out there and burn it there. But
well, so as soon as we identify that spot, I'll sign this, no problem. Councillor Kroll. Oh, sorry, we got a comment from the CAO here.
I can wait, but at the same time, it's we've been raising that for several years with the regional district. And Seashell as well. It's a regional problem that we need to address, and because there's cross jurisdiction transportation of these, and it's not just folks from the green waste. There's private contractors. There's all kinds of, and quite honestly, I don't know that people are going out of their way to throw knotweed out and cause an issue. There's a fair amount of education that needs to go along with that. We are in discussions about the green waste site in general with the SCRD, and if council would consider a resolution to make that a bit more explicit, then we can bring that to the regional district for our discussions with them and see if we can get something as well.
I would totally support that as a first step. Councillor Crowell?
Just to follow up with what the CAO was saying, the regional district was talking about, closing the South Coast Green Waste, which everyone sort of said, no way. What they are looking at doing is putting it out for tender, and I think that's what the CAO was referring to. What would be very useful in the negotiations going forward is that there be a provision at the green waste for dealing with invasive species. The Seashelt landfill has just said they will take broom provided it's bagged in clear plastic bags. If there is a provision at the South Coast Green Waste that everyone can benefit from in dealing with invasive species, whether it's knotweed or English ivy or holly, as long as it's properly contained so it doesn't spread, and arrangements can be set up that it can go to a burn site, which would make sense. But it is something that is going to be coming up with the regional district with respect to the South Coast Green Waste. And I would certainly advocate as the Gibsons rep there that provision for hazardous materials be included, or environmentally invasive species be included in the tender that goes out for bidding.
Okay, so it's funny, I think I'm missing a page in my printed out agenda here. Our objective today was just to receive this verbal report. For some reason, I'm not seeing it on my page, but I believe that's what it was. Did we even make a motion to receive it? We did.
Yeah.
Do we want to make a motion here today that we ask staff to work with the SCRD and report back to us on secure disposal site for noxious weeds?
Yes, good idea.
Okay. Are you moving that, Councillor DeAndrade? Is that where your hand's up, or you want to make a comment?
No, I just want, because I think people have a sense that knotweed is bad, but they don't have the sense how bad it is. And the town commissioned an expert in a subject, and she wrote a wonderful report. And I, first of all, advise that every council member or the committee member reads the report for a better understanding, and the understanding that knotweed, the treatment has to be done very professionally. And if it's not a professional expert in knotweed, it should be someone that's really following instructions and understanding the difference between species. So you have to also have the knowledge to different species. So we are talking about something that if you don't do properly, you can cause problems in the future, right? So I think one thing is to talk about noxious species generally, but I think knotweed should be, right, treated different. And this could be even a great opportunity for landscapers to get trained, specialized. And I suggest that the report, that the management plan that the expert in knotweed and invasive species did for the town be also on the website widespread, because this should be every single landscaper should be aware of that. So I think it's important when we communicate with the SCRD. I don't know if they have this knowledge. They probably are supported by, I know there's a lot of groups, invasive species group, but this is very important. They should be, all the invasive groups, the South Coast Invasive Association here should be, sitting together in this decision making and in helping to write the bylaw.
Okay, so I fully agree with everything you're saying. I think what we need to do then is pass a motion that we direct staff to identify a disposal site and and work on public education of the matter before we get to passing of this bylaw.
I would like to hear from the expert how to deal with knotweed. And we heard like from, if you read the plan, but how can we operationalize this through the bylaw? I think that's the important, to me is the missing point, because to tell an owner, I want you to get rid of the bylaw of this knotweed, and I can do whatever I want, it's very problematic.
Okay, so what you're saying then is, well, there's a few things. We need to figure out a disposal site. We need to understand how to manage or eradicate knotweed on private property. Like, people need to know how to do that
Properly.
and that properly. And then we need to take that knowledge and incorporate it into this bylaw. It may already be adequate, but we don't know that, is what your concern is. So does somebody want to help me out here with the language around emotion? Anyone?
No, I'm still looking at it at the regional level. I mean, I just don't think Gibsons is going to solve that problem. So
We're
I
not.
think working at we have a regional noxious weed committee
Mhm.
and a regional noxious weed bylaw, and that's what we should be working with. And we should be working with the regional board, and especially if they're because this is not just a local problem. And people in area E and people in area F are looking for ways to dispose of knotweed as well, not just people in Gibsons.
Mhm.
And they'll use the Greenway site. So that
Maybe the recommendation then is that this committee recommends that council directs our SCRD representative to push the issue at the SCRD board to find a disposal site, educate the public, and get more training on the matter.
well, that'd be good.
Okay, I'll move that.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, does anyone is all in favor?
Well, discussion. I would like us to bring this committee into the picture, right? Because this committee is doing things, and now we are writing a bylaw, and we got input from an expert, but I think it's important, right?
Well, we can put this bylaw. We can just shelve this right now. We're not passing this bylaw. It's fine. It's sitting here. We don't have to do anything with it yet until we get these questions answered as you're raising them. And so that's what we're trying to do.
But don't forget, the bylaw came about as a result of some problems that we have in town. We have a huge infestation on Hillcrest. We have one up in the next phase of Parkland. We have one behind the A&W, and nothing is being done about those infestations as long as we dither on a bylaw. So just the way of, I don't really not worried about the plant or two on your property. Because, but I am worried about the large infestations where I see the deer grazing in them and wandering to the next property, and the birds eating off the flowers and flying to the next property. So those are the issues we have. It's not how we deal with the single plant. It's how we deal with the large infestations that we should actually be declaring, in my view, a nuisance and requiring the owners to take action, professional action, to eradicate them. And that can be done. I know many property owners who have had large infestations on their property have treated them over time and have dealt with them. And so that can be done. And you don't have to take them away to deal with them. They can be treated on site. And it is a case of stem injection, and it is a case of doing it and doing it rigorously by professionals. And the province comes in annually and treats major infestations along the highways, and they were here earlier this year.
So I think we're all speaking the same. We're all wanting the same thing here. I think.
But I think, sorry, Charlotte, I think the conversation changed because last conversation, when you were not here, I didn't hear the word professional. And I think that's the word for knotweed, right? It has to be treated professionally. And then if the professional knows how to dispose, they have special bags and they can take even to Vancouver to incinerators, we would have solved the situation. But my concern is to impose to any owner that they now have to deal with the knotweed, and they would do the way they think is the right way. And so professional, I think with knotweed, I don't mind declaring a nuisance in this regard, and they must treat professionally. Perhaps we do just a bylaw for the knotweed right now.
Okay, so here's my concern with that thinking, Councillor DeAndrade, is that a lot of people, I would just cut it down, bag it up with all my other green waste and ignore it. Then I'm saying I shouldn't say I would, but I'm just like, I can see people. And if you make it too prohibitive, if you make it too challenging, then it won't get dealt with at all, or it will be dealt with very irresponsibly, as opposed to what Mayor Beamish, I believe, is saying, where we want to develop at least a disposal site here that's responsible. May not be as great, but it nips the seeds off before they get started, and it prevents the deers from being able to spread the seeds around. Like I hear what you're saying. To totally eradicate it might require professional services, but if we make it a bylaw where we're just talking about having it dealt with professionally, some people aren't going to deal with it at all, or they're going to deal with it under the table. Kind of.
It's just some knowledge. The problem with knotweed, any little piece is a new plant. It's so Mayor Beamish is talking about the seeds spreading by seeds. When you cut pieces and you dispose, every little piece that fell on the highway through transportation, every little leftover, it's a new infestation. That's what knotweed is about. So and that's what it is. I think we should get the expert and have a bigger discussion, because knotweed, it's a bigger, we might be causing more problems than solving.
Okay, so we passed a motion, sorry, CAO, we passed a motion, or I made a motion, we didn't pass it, sorry. I made a motion, Mayor Beamish seconded it. Let's deal with that motion. And then I think we could also maybe talk about another motion where we request that this committee advise council to bring in an expert to talk to us. If that's, I mean, maybe we do need to have somebody come in, a professional, and educate us as a council about knotweed, because I don't,
Exactly.
I don't
Can
know.
you remind me of the motion, the Mayor Beamish motion?
Well, we need to talk about that.
No, can you remind, like, what's
would you mind, Lindsay? Or
The one that was moved and seconded was that the SCRD representative bring this issue up with the SCRD.
Well, I thought it was a little bit more specific in that the representative raised this issue with the SCRD to talk about proper disposal sites.
Okay.
And education and public education. Sorry, CAO, you came on and then.
No, it's just more through you, Chair, just clarifying the motion. And I just think that the conversation seems to have been going in different directions. And I thought it might be a good idea to sort of, the purpose that we brought the bylaw forward was to address a weak spot that we have in our policy, to do something about somebody that has an infestation, a large problem on their site. We currently don't have such a bylaw, so we don't want to lose sight of that. We also relatedly brought a plan for the town's own properties, and that's what Councilor DeAndrade is talking about. That plan, the implementation of that plan will it's something we're still working through with a consultant as well. But there's a lot of the issues that Council has been talking about. Those issues have existed and continue to exist until we find the original solution, and that's the disposition and the education primarily. And on the disposition, we just don't have such a site, and we have confusing policies where everybody's kind of at different levels and different stages. So sort of it's a complex problem to solve just by talking and coming back in a staff report. And I wanted to suggest that we try to solve one problem at a time as much as possible, and just build on our set of tools. Just something to consider as we go through it.
Okay. I appreciate that, but I'm going to stay stuck on this disposal issue. I'm cutting down wax of it in my yard, and I've been bringing it to green waste. And now that I think about that, I think that's really bad, but I didn't know. And so like, I know it's complicated, but even if we had a separate bin and just told everybody, at least separate your knotweed, and I don't know what it does, just sit there and rot, but at least it's separate.
I think people would do that if they had that option.
I would. I just didn't. We didn't have the option, and I didn't even know it was an issue. Well, bringing it to the green waste. Director of Planning.
Thank you. So the bylaw, what it does is it says you need to deal with it. appropriately. So you need to make sure it's a controlled invasion, I guess. And by doing that, you would have to have some kind of management plan. So some knotweed and knotweed growths would take years to control. And some of the best practices out there are just dealing with it on site and not cutting it down. Because when you cut it down, it puts energy into the roots and then it makes it spread. So a lot of the treatment recommendations are treating it on site, letting it dry up in place. Once it's crispy dry, it can go in the green waste. It can go in your compost. It's not going to spread. But the problem right now is that when we ask people to clear it, they will take a knife to it and just chop it right down, which is resulting in more spreading. So we don't have the tools right now to get a management plan for knotweed. Specifically, knotweed is the problem species. The Schedule A list in the bylaw is not just knotweed. It includes giant hogweed and some other really bad invasive plants. And that's why we don't specifically ask for a certified specialist to write a management plan, because this bylaw is not specific to knotweed. It has other listed invasive plants, and the treatment options are different for each invasive plant. But what we would ask for is a management plan. And then with that management plan, we would be relying on a professional.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that conversation back to this bylaw being a tool that we could use. Without it, we're where we're at right now. Disposal is an ongoing issue, and council could advocate through the regional district for a disposal site for invasive plants. Salish Soils takes many of them, but not all of them. Not Scotch broom, not knotweed. I don't know if they take hogweed. I don't know what the exceptions are, but that is an ongoing regional issue. So yeah.
Some of the problems in knotweed, for example, on construction sites or development sites, is that one way of dealing with it is simply bring your excavator in and dig deep and load it on the back of the truck. And 6 months later, that becomes backfill on another project. And that moves the knotweed from one site to another site. And that's a big problem. And that's what we've seen. I had a telephone pole replaced in front of my house on Chasser Road, and a year later I had knotweed because the dirt they brought in for the backfill had knotweed in it, sort of thing. So that those are the things we need to deal with. And as I say, the smaller, manageable on your property issues are more manageable than the big ones that are spreading and growing each year. I mean, I've been here in Parkland for 4 years, and I've watched this one project grow exponentially every year because it's not being treated, it's not being dealt with. There's no incentive on the property owner to deal with it, no requirement for him to deal with it. It's on his private property, yet it is increasing in size and thickness every year. And so the one behind the A&W started growing after they cleared the lot. And in clearing the lot of all the trees, they moved the knotweed around, and it became a much bigger site. And the hillside one is much the same. It's a cleared lot. Suddenly the knotweed became a much bigger problem. So those are the ones I'm more concerned about. When we have other places, with Charming Creek Banks has got knotweed on it, and they're very small clumps of it, but they're not right now blocking the creek, but eventually they will.
Okay, Councillor DeAndrade, and then I have to admit I'm confused about where we're going with this conversation. And I know, Corporate Officer, we still have a motion sitting out there. I haven't forgotten. Councillor DeAndrade.
Well, based on a comment of the Director of Planning that she said that we would request a management plan, and she said it will be a professional. That's what I was hoping, that we have a clause on the bylaw that we require a professional, because if she, let's say I have knotweed on my property, she asked me a management plan, I can draw my own plan. I think I have enough knowledge. I can do, but I might not be doing the right thing. So that's what I was hoping, that we can, why can't we demand that it would be treated professionally if it's something that deserves professional treatment? And it's not going to be a one time, it's ongoing. So that needs to resolve temporarily the disposal issue, because if you do properly, like the director of planning commented, then you can leave it on site, but you have to do properly. You have to have monitoring. And these are the things. Why can't we not come up with a bylaw that we request professional treatment?
So well, I have to say, just to back up for a minute, I'm getting a much better understanding of kind of the background behind this bylaw, and if I'm reading between the lines correctly, is it sort of are we kind of putting this forward right now to try to tackle some of these big commercial lots that are sitting there vacant that are just piling up with noxious weed? Is that really what we're trying to do? Because that's very different than, you know, someone's backyard.
That was the kind of intent. The initial intent was either to declare those properties a nuisance and require them to fix them up, or to work with them and get a management plan so they will deal with it, sort of thing.
Okay, because we're not going to just ask somebody with a residential lot 50 by 100 feet to go develop a management plan, a residential lot.
We should.
Yeah. Not unless
So if we have a bylaw in place that says you have to make sure your property remains free from uncontrolled, invasive, and noxious weeds, essentially it says you have to deal with the invasive plants on your property. We're not going to go around and start looking for it and ticketing people, but if we respond to complaints. So if a neighbor has a beautiful vegetable garden and the knotweed keeps coming through the fence and taking over, and we get complaints, then yes, we would respond to the complaint, and we would have this bylaw to use to say you need to come up with a management plan. So that it's a tool. It's essentially a tool that allows us to do that.
And a management plan could be simply a 8 by 11 piece of paper saying this is how I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah, it could be you need to treat it. It depends. I mean, if it's one stalk of knotweed, it's very straightforward. You could they'll say we'll treat it by injecting it on Sunday. Good enough. I mean, if it's much bigger than that, it needs ongoing monitoring. If it keeps growing back and keeps invading, then we would need a more detailed management plan. But we're basically saying you need to come up with a plan to figure out how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Crowell.
Thank you, Chair. I would like, at this point, to be able to deal with the larger properties that have been discussed. They're obviously a source of contamination, which is causing, it to spread. Getting in, the injection, as the Director of Planning said, that's a process that has to be continued over a period of a minimum of 5 to 6 years to ensure that, because it's going to keep coming up. Because a lot of times what happens is you inject it and it has these other little things underground that resist the injection and actually become hardier plants. So it's not just inject it once and the problem solved. It's a 5 to 6 year monitoring plan and re-injection and yada, 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 which is a bit onerous for the average homeowner. But I think if we can get a handle on the large scale and insist that the people that have large infestations on their property, that it be dealt with by professionals. And in the meantime, the tender that goes out for the green waste on the South Coast needs to include a component for dealing with invasive species. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so our objective today was just to receive this report. We have an outstanding motion that now I understand is sort of on the side of what the broader conversation is. Why don't we finish that motion just so Lindsay or see how it doesn't have to worry about it. So let's tackle that. So we made a motion that this committee would recommend that council directs our SCRD representative to have a conversation with the SCRD about proper disposal of noxious weeds and broader public education. I moved that. Mayor Beamish seconded it. Are we all in favor of that motion? Councillor Kroll reluctantly puts his hand up.
No, and I'll include in that, it needs to be a coast-wide initiative because Knotweed doesn't recognize the border between Gibsons and Area E.
That's why we're asking you to bring it up at the SCRD level.
No, so it needs to be a coast-wide attack.
Right. So that's great.
Bring in Agent Orange.
Yeah. So then we have this bylaw that we've received today, and I'm not sure what this committee is wanting me to do with it beyond the fact that we've thoroughly discussed it. And there's no recommendation here for me to try to move. So we've received it, we've discussed it. Are we done for today?
Well, I don't think we got much time unless you want to extend.
I understand that, yeah. So are we going to leave that at where it is for this afternoon and wait for a report back from the SCRD in September?
May I make a suggestion? I would love, when I read the management plan that the expert wrote to the town, I feel like the knotweed should be only dealt by expert. So I would like to hear from her, because even the attempt that a homeowner keep cutting their knotweed, they're actually increasing the problem. And we need to look at short-term and long-term, medium-term and long-term. Everybody's on the same boat. Our town, it's starting to be infested, or maybe there's already a big level of infestation, whatever you classify. And I think this is an ongoing, but I'm reluctant or just say, well, anyone can come up with a management plan. No, because my management plan would impact my neighbor if I don't do properly, because that's what happens with knotweed. So I would like to bring the expert to perhaps to have a discussion with us.
And I apologize, you did raise that earlier. So would you like to make a motion that?
I make a motion to bring even Jennifer, she's very knowledgeable, to enlighten us and to help us with, council can understand, so we can do a bylaw that can really address long-term the issue. I appreciate it.
Are you making a motion to have this expert come to this committee or to council?
No, I don't know how. Can she just talk to, I don't know how, what's the best format. I mean.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend that she brings that we ask her to come and present to council.
To council.
I mean, unless Cliff is thoroughly interested in here. Would you like this to?
Council is a committee, and I think that in some sense we should, if we want to move the bylaw forward, we should put the bylaw on an agenda and have her come and speak on the same agenda, and then move the bylaw. The bylaw already requires the same management plan and for the bylaw officer to be satisfied with, so that there would be that to and fro in that conversation. But we did receive the report when we received a copy of the bylaw. The report was there as well to read, and it was a good report. And it requires, as eradication requires a management plan, and to the satisfaction of the bylaw officer. But I think if we just take it to council, then council is going to come back to this committee again on the bylaw, and we're going to go through the discussion. Let's put it back to this committee with the bylaw and see if we can't move forward.
Okay.
I'm happy to bring to this committee.
Okay, so committee to have the expert come and present to this committee.
The specific issue with knotweed, because there's other nasty but noxious, but not as, and she can talk, she has expertise in all the weeds.
I'd like to hear about Scotch broom and horsetail personally, but anyway, okay, we'll leave it at that. Mayor Beamish has seconded that, I believe.
Yeah.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. I just want to be cognizant we are running out of time. We've got 1 minute left. I believe that wraps up all our reports for today. Do we have any inquiries? Do we have any inquiries?
At this time, I'll ask anyone in the meeting as an attendee, if you would like to ask a question of the committee, if you could use the raise the hand feature at the bottom of the screen, and I'll turn on your video and audio. And I'm not seeing anyone, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that wraps up our meeting then. The next regular Planning and Development Committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, September 15th at 3 o'clock. So can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Councillor DeAndrade, second by Mayor Beamish, all in favor.
See you later.
Thanks,
Thank-
everybody.
Yeah, see you later. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Beth.
Enjoy the rest of your summer, everyone.
Yeah,
Nice.
you
Take
too.
care.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
Bye.